Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnan. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Welcome to Side Quests, your high-octane distraction from those other podcasts. We're a pen and paper RPG audio show featuring chitter and chatter about rules and how to master them, epic world-building, player investment, and interviews with the people who make the games you love. Listen in as we trade tabletop war stories, make judgment calls on odd situations, and do everything we can to give you more RPG resources than you could dream of, all from a simple side quest. I'm Eli. Paladin Craig, you there?
Craig?
All right. Craig is in Portugal.
Is he? That's right. He is on a holiday because of all of our celebratory end of the year going on. And we decided that we wanted to keep the schedule for our listeners. So Craig said, let's do this without me. You guys have a good time. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So I'm Paladin of Podcast Rob, and Eli and I, we've been really excited about some of the things that we want to talk about. Eli, you sent me something. I want you to kind of bring it in, and we will discuss and debate.
I think this is a kind of a common problem. It's a situation where if you have a player with an 18 charisma or a very high social stat, and the player doesn't have a good argument, or might be someone that doesn't like to role play. It feels wrong to kind of punish the player because the character can't make a good argument. But that 18 charisma might just let them, if they roll it for no matter the situation. How do you handle these kind of situations where, like high stats that a player might not have themselves? I mean, anyone's.
Yeah. I think it comes down to how the game master decides that he's going to utilize this one. Almost, for example, I like to have a lot of my players make rolls for what I consider degrees of success. So when their charisma is high, I allow them to roll against a difficulty check, a DC check. Sometimes it's arbitrary, or sometimes I'm just trying to gauge approximately how successful they're going to be. So out of a D20, I break it up into like chunks, or like I said, attached to a DC. And if they barely make it, I'm like, look, you're kind of fumbling through this. You're stumbling along, tripping over some. You're not quite delivering the message that you want to say. And then when I tie that into people who don't like to role play, it's easy because they don't have to like, oh, you know what, that's exactly how it's going to go down. People who get higher rolls and don't like to role play, I can kind of, hey, you're doing well. You're convincing the guards that this is how you want to deal with not going to prison. You want to try to bribe them a little bit, and they're feeling kind of good about this. So I never give the same standard or set when they utilize it, but I generally give them the opportunity to attempt it.
And so are you suggesting to roll before you, like for the role player, are you suggesting that they roll before they role play?
Yes, that's how I would do so. I say, they say, this is what I want to do. I'm like, all right, you know what? Roll me a persuasion or a sense motive kind of thing. And this is kind of what you glean from it while it's happening, or the role play is going down. I skew it to what they're gauging and getting.
If a role player has a result of a check and then role plays, can they get a better result?
I would flex that a little bit, but I wouldn't let them know I'm going down that route. So if they rolled let's say they rolled a 10, and I'd say DC was like 9. So, you're making it work. He's kind of iffy, but the guard is like, you know what? I don't think I've got the time to deal with you. But he really lays into it hardcore. He's like, you know what? And he goes on about a sob story, and he just won't let up. He would sway the guard a little bit more, kind of thing. Yeah, I would do that.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. For me, I feel like the role player ends up getting not necessarily something better, but something more specific. Because when you role play, sometimes you add in extra details that can clue me in on what you're looking for, or how you're looking for that information to be delivered.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not quite the same if you just, when you're just asking for a check. And it's hard to get into some of those same details.
I agree. And I think one of the downsides is when you have a table that is varying with people who are at different levels of comfortability in role playing, you have what ends up defaulting to your party face, and those other people are allowed to sort of drift into the back and roll dice when it suits them. And as long as they're having fun, it's okay. But when they feel like they are at a disadvantage because they're not comfortable or good with role playing, that's when it starts to become a little bit of a problem. And you have to find more creative solutions. One of which I've recently started doing is actually eliminating as many roles as possible. If I know my players are going to keep attempting and trying to do something until successful, we don't even roll anymore. It's just included now. And I think that this scenario allows for something like that to happen. Again, all I would do is just use the roll check as a supplemental degree of success.
Do you do anything to try to pull in any of, like, when you have a face, sometimes you get, the role play or at least the interaction with you can end up being one-sided. Is there any tricks that you use to try to pull in those other players who do want to role play but might just be taking a back seat?
Yeah, this one's really, it requires a level of attention from me as the game master. And when players will say something, sometimes they'll mutter something under their breath, whether it's in character or out of character, I respond as though the NPC has heard it every time. So like, hey, they're engaging right now as their character is bored or irritated or sarcastically making a comment, and a quick quip about, oh, I'm sorry, what was that? I mean, if you want to speak up, please take the floor. Obviously, it's more important. I will just calmly step back for you. Because my players are all very snarky. So when they want to be snarky, I'm a little snarky back. And they enjoy it. So that attention allows me to clue in on when they're being active. And as long as it's not too pushy or too out of the blue, it generally gets my players specifically. So I've learned how to work with them.
I have a little bit of an interesting situation at my home table. They have a definite face of the party who is a great role player, but is one of those players that if someone else wants the spotlight, like they're very willing to step aside and let other players have like their moment in the limelight, but they're a little bit bad at like keeping it themselves when they haven't like really had a chance to shine. So like there's been it's almost a running joke that anytime the party ever runs into a social situation, their character is never the one to actually like be the one to interact. And sometimes it happens because they'll like start in the engagement, and then other things will come up, and then it'll just kind of shift.
Okay.
So, and then they'll just be like, "What?" So
that is very interesting. I've had issues where when it comes to social situations in game, my players will kind of vote on who is talking to this person. And they will go through with just about every NPC, like, you know what, you've had a great interaction the last two people you've talked to. Why don't you keep going with this? And sometimes it's decided on how well their dice are rolling, and sometimes it's decided on the fact that, you know, you've already asked 4 questions and you're asking everything I was going to ask anyway, so just keep it rolling. It's weird. There are so many different ways that people do this at the table, even online. It doesn't matter. It's just incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to handle online, I feel, just because it's harder to have, unless you're using video. Even with video, it's hard to tell necessarily where your focus is, and a lot of like in-person games, it's great to be able to have like your like. Oftentimes I stand when I'm GMing in person, I just get excited, and it's easy to have your attention focused, you know, in a direction, and you know, that can help direct chaotic situations.
Right. Now, I'd like to talk about that for a second, because it echoes something I've heard before, and I've mentioned in bits and pieces about when I did my trip to Gen Con and I listened to Alphinius Gu's seminar. And one of the things that he had mentioned is, as a DM, we should absolutely be able to get up, stand up, walk around, approach our players, you know, quickly, fastly, slowly, to try to get them to interact in a different way, to hit another sense, so to speak. And I feel myself going closer to that desire. And you're already there, even with just standing up. Do you push that farther still into the, I mean, how close would you get to a player?
It depends. At Gen Con, I don't approach players unless I'm like helping them or pointing out something on their, you know, their character sheet, like, oh, hey, check this out, or oh, this is where you should, like, but I don't really approach them as opposed to like their, but at my home tables, I'm everywhere. You know, I'm around. I'm in the player's face if, you know, they're getting grilled. So, I mean, all with the player's consent, of course, but everywhere. You know, especially like with my NPCs, I'm a very very physical talker.
I think that helps too, and I don't like. So I don't move a whole lot. Like I sit down, and I started wearing, I don't want to say costumes, but I wear costumes. There's no way around that.
Some sick GM outfits. It's
well,
dope.
It's so, to kind of detail this, I wear a medieval style tunic, bracers, torque for the necklace, and if they're talking to anybody who is of guard status, for example, I've got pauldron. For anybody that they'd be talking to, like another party I have is in the Ashlands, which is kind of like the bandit run mountains, essentially. So I'm dressed as a rogue, hood, mask, the whole deal, black shit on my eyes. So I got that, and I sit at the table and I try to present. I talk with my hands. I don't generally get up and move, and I'm thinking about it. But that means I got to buy pants too, and I generally just wear blue jeans.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean,
you could probably get some pants.
I should.
Yeah, I stay up all the time. But I also have a lot of energy, so it helps.
I like that. I've tried to. I've slowed my storytelling down a little bit, and it helps for me to sit down when doing so. If I'm standing, I want to power right through everything, which is kind of weird. But I guess
it's great to have pauses. The pauses are the best, because then there's the implication that the players will, you know, they're leaving just strategic enough pauses that they fill it. Yes,
I completely agree. Looking through some of the other things that we wanted to chat about as well. The one that hit me is really interesting, and I'm curious to see if you've done something similar. I found this on Reddit under the Pathfinder 2E subthreads by the Games Thief, and they talk about how their table refers to common language, common, as Taldan when possible. And they explain that they utilize this method specifically to reinforce the fact that they are speaking a different language. It's none of their native tongues where they're at. So instead of referring to it as common, which is seen as the common language, it is Taldan. I like that. I think it's really neat.
Well, I kind of like it, but I think that's just because I hate common.
Okay.
Get rid of it. Just get rid of it entirely. I don't think there should be a common language. If you have a bunch of human empires, give each one a language. That's the easiest way to do it. If you want to get into more specifics, you can have languages uniting countries, but yeah, give every country a language. I think it just leads to a lot more unique situations with your players only interacting with some people, or needing a translator, having to hire someone to interpret things. But I also play Hackmaster, which has those features.
Okay.
It also has limited literacy, which also plays into that. So
that's fair.
I fully support this idea, and I would take it one more step.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. Where I feel like I a lot of times will take it back a step, if that makes sense. I'll turn common into more of a Latin. So the common tongue is the root of all language, and it has developed dialects and derivatives from there. And people can choose not to speak in common as they so see fit. And my mentality is this way: if somebody doesn't want to communicate in common, they are purposefully doing so for some form of insulting manner. Like, why would a noble elf talk to a mere human who has such a short lifespan? They're below them. I would never speak that tongue to an individual because I am better. I think I've breached that topic before. This route here in the opposite direction of how I usually roll, I like because it says, common is just not really common. It's a language. Everybody can speak it, but it has a name. It has a geographical tie. It has not native roots in your lexicon. So I don't know, pushing it one step. Maybe I'll get there.
I think it helps give characters more. It's easier to get more background. It's like, how can you explain that, like, if you choose even just 3 nations or spots on the map, and you're like, I want these 3 languages. Well, how did that happen? Were you bilingual, or did you do tours where you visited them? Did you know someone? It kind of like can help expand your backstory because you had to have learned it somehow. And it's going to be something exotic, or at least ties you to that language or even that nation somehow.
That's true. And I like that. And you mentioned something right then that wasn't really on the mind of things to talk about, but I've got to know because this has bothered me a little bit. Not about anybody I really know in particular, but a style of DMing that I'm not a big fan of, and it comes from I don't want to say older gamers, older game masters, but it seems to be that mentality that's left over from older editions of games. How do you feel about your players having backstory, like pre-adventure adventures, stories, pre-adventuring successes?
I don't care. Oftentimes I give like experience points for characters that bring backstories of a certain length range.
Caliber.
Yeah. I don't need 40 pages, but you give me 1,000 pages and a good insight into your character. Great. Especially if you can have extra details that can tie you to a country or tie you to a villain or anything like that. Please.
And that's what I love. Like, I've lamented many times over so many pages of backstory and how, as much as I love it and read it, I don't want them anymore. But I don't want 0. I love the fact that as long as my players completely understand that if we're starting at level 1 whatever major thing that you have done, regardless of how absolute big, is irrelevant at 0 at level 1, because toppling a kingdom before level 1 seems a little difficult. We're going to have to kind of work that in there somehow. So I get why a lot of DMs are like, no, I don't like that backstory shit.
So that's the thing you dislike, is when GMs don't accept backstories?
I don't like it when they just blatantly say, I don't want a backstory. I like something, as you said, to tie them to the world by some measure, a degree, a character, an NPC. That's actually leading into a problem I'm having right now with I'm trying not to interconnect everything. I got to keep things separate.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit for a backstory, I mean, I think a GM should want players to write backstories, because that's like you want the players to accept your world. Mm-hmm. But I mean, no one's just going to sit down and just be 100% invested in what you've brought to them. And them writing a backstory is their first like compromise or handshake of trying to interact with your world.
I agree.
I think it's the best. I mean, aside from having a session 0, I think this is the backstories are the best way to interact with players about the theme and tone of your game, by chatting about their backstories.
I agree with that. And you kind of said something that sparks another question. Something I'm trying this time around is no story arc, no big bad evil guide, no planned anything. Like I literally have 0 story planned, and my entire world is developing, but my players' stories are developing specifically around them and the backstories that they bring me. So they're giving me all the ideas. They're laying the entire foundation. Every single one of them, I'm giving the opportunity to have main character syndrome. And I figure they're going to get in enough trouble on their own to develop a reoccurring bad guy at some point. But
it's a bold move. I think it's worthy. I think it's a good. I think you can sometimes end up with situations where your party does feel a little bit directionless. So that's one kind of downfall with that, like having at least a little bit planned from the beginning for maybe like the first villain, can help give the party some direction, I think.
It can. And I think this is where it balances if you know your players. Like I can tell you about my 2 different groups in this particular example, because they both attacked it similar but different, and yet different but the same. My first group started with one of our characters ended up running bodyguard for a merchant character when he was still getting his footing in one area. And it's been a little while. They kind of separated ties, and she left some bad blood behind when she did it because she did not agree with his outlook on life. Cool. She kind of helped write that background for that character. I named him. I gave him a future. They run into each other again by name so far, and she hates the guy still, way more powerful. And now mission number 1 is to solve an issue for somebody else, but kill this guy next. So
you did have some pre-planning done for introducing villains, but based off their backstories.
Right. It was all out of their backstory. The second group I have, which is actually the character profile I was working on before our podcast today, I had an idea a little bit of a character background story. I'm like, all right, I like this. I don't want to say a throwaway NPC. It'd be just a reoccurring bar owner at an NPC. So, you kind of just keep bringing them back. They ended up taking the information I have. Like, this guy gives out jobs. You need a job in this place. He will hire anybody to do whatever it needed to be done. Well, they ended up being hired for a more of a test. It was a delivery project, but it was a test in how they handled it, and they bombed it super bad. So bad. Oh my God, so bad. I've got to tell everybody about this because it was so bad. I do not want to hijack my own podcast with you, Eli, but this, oh my God.
Okay.
So I've just laid that groundwork, that foundation for this. And the quick gist is his name is Goonie, and he's a rat folk. And his backstory is not known to the party. It's not really known to anybody else. But his general premise in the town of Fence is he hires anybody to do just about any job possible. And people he has a good word on or likes a little bit, he actually puts them on a fake job, a MacGuffin, as a test. And my party was put on this test job. Well, they had to find in a kind of like a small porthole, a box. Ratfolk are small characters, so the box was a little bit too big for just him. He needed two of him, but one human could have carried it just fine. So the way he's describing this is, it's a little big, a little heavy. Can't really do it myself. They find it, and everybody in town knows what this box is. It never moves. But my players are new to the town, so they didn't know this. They were not given that information. Like, this is a test. And the second that they start to pull it out of this, the entire cavern is obsidian glass, and it's heavy with sharp corners, so it makes a huge echoing, dragging sound as they pull it from the hole. And everybody knows what they're pulling out of where and what it is. And oh my God, shit just hits the fan. So everybody's staring at them, and they're supposed to do this job quickly and as little notice as possible, which they were told. On their way back, they noticed that they had some tails following them from when they were on their way there. These were Goonies guys just trying to keep an eye, see what happens. They stand in front of them as an obstacle to see what's going on, and one of my players just confesses everything about what they're doing. Like,
okay.
all the information, which he didn't have a whole lot. But he's like, hey, we were told that we got to move this box as a job, and this guy gave it to us, and this guy is. I was like, shit. I was like, you know what? If it was supposed to be a test, this guy cannot just say, oh, well, shit, you failed. That's
Did they have the impression that like this was an above board job as opposed to something that was supposed to be on the down low?
They had the impression that it needed to be done quickly. Everybody in town would know what the box was when they seen it. Nobody wanted anything to do with the box. So they kind of felt like they were the last people on Earth that would just be willing to do this. So they did not get the impression that they were having any sort of test. They did not have any sort of impression that they were supposed to kind of do this on the down low. But they knew that the city was full of thieves, bandits, people who would steal from you if you turned in a circle, full of criminals. Those who have and have nots. Very dog-eat-dog world. So not only did this player absolutely 100% confess to the thugs, he split the party. Everybody else delivered the box. And this guy returned to Goonie, the gentleman who gave them the job, and asked clarifying questions, told him that he absolutely blabbered about everything to these two thugs. And I'm like, all right, at this point, I'm like, this guy's going to have to go mob boss style, because nobody in their right mind would hire people who are going to blab about anything when they need it done on the down low. Like, these are obviously not criminals. Like, they can't be criminals. And fair enough, I did tell my party that they have to be heroes at the end of the day. So, like, I didn't mean today, just by the end of the game, you better be a hero. So, yeah, absolutely pissed off. Threatened him. And he's only a rat folk. And I'm like, you know what? He's got to be something behind him is the reason why nobody screws with this guy anymore. And then that's what I used to tie into a player's backstory, because we developed something about a little bit of a mob connection with her father, who had taken a small loan out and couldn't repay it. I was like, how do these organizations work, and why would this guy be here? It all came together. But dude, they screwed up horribly. Like, I gave the player 600 additional XP because he absolutely 100% role played that to a T. So
well, awesome. As long as everyone's having a good time, and great.
Yeah, it was, dude. Oh my god. You ever had those situations where your player? Yes, you did.
Oh yes,
Yeah, yellow mold tea.
Yeah. Being a GM is planning for or preparing for 5 things and having a 6th option happen.
Yes.
So
I love it. I love when the players bring that, and I love it when it gives you the opportunity to redevelop something on the fly into something that works into a greater scheme. So, I mean, really, with this character now, NPC he's no longer just a throwaway bar owner. I mean, he is. Will he forgive the party? Will he give them a second chance? Will he ever work with them again? Will he sully their names? Will he help run them out of town? I mean, that's kind of how it gets to be made up now. How ruthless does this NPC go? And that's where I get really excited. That's why I was 2 minutes late today, because I was like just finishing up the background of general personality.
So you and me are both really solidly on the side of backstories.
Yes.
So what do you think about games with random character generation? Like where you generate your backstory and then that kind of is your character?
I would have to say I'm a little pouty about it at first, but I still have a good time. Like, I always want something that I think is really cool or badass, and to not get it or see that potential, it's kind of a bummer, but I don't let it get in the way of having a good time. Like, I don't focus on not getting what I wanted. I still do it. I still abide by the rules. I still enjoy it. The process is always fun. I like learning new shit. I just secretly wish I get cool shit to go with it.
Do you mind if I ask what random character generation have you gone with?
I've randomly generated D&D characters out of die rolls, everything from gender to class to race, height. I've used the random tables for all of those for character generation. There was a game I played. For the love of God, I wish I remember the name of it. I know my DM who ran the game. I know he would, but I don't have his contact information. But anyhow, we role played as cars, like killer cars, and I don't know. I mowed down other people. It was weird. All of it was random though. You didn't get to pick anything. Like here, you roll for everything. This is the car, your tires, your wheels. This is your bonuses. This is your lack of bonuses, etc. That was fun. And shot myself in the foot already. Marvel Superheroes Classic by TSR. That is 100% random. So I love that game. I love that system. I love the random power generation, but at the same time, you get stuck with like really weird powers that don't work either. So
I absolutely love it. So maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I love those style games that kind of challenge challenge the player to become the character instead of bringing a character to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it tends to fall apart especially unbalanced when it's a game that's got like a lot of depth in the character creation and then like limited. Like I think random generation doesn't work for D&D just because there are so many, like D&D has so many options at character creation, but then it's got some rules that are maybe there's less depth to their individual rules. And so random generating in the ocean of character creation is going to give you with some, every so often you pull a bad fish.
Yeah, I love the players who can roll with the bad fish and make it fantastic.
One of my favorite, or at least fantasy random character generation games, you actually brought up in the news, or you found a tidbit of news.
Mm-hmm.
I never understand how to say their company name. It's Modiphius.
Modiphius.
So there's there's word on the street that Modiphius is ending support for their Conan game.
The D20 Conan?
Yes, the
2D20.
2D20.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a bummer.
I am not too bummed out on it, honestly, because I'm a huge Conan fan.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a tattoo of Conan. Oh, other shoulder.
Hot damn. That's awesome.
Yes. So I'm a huge fan of Conan, and like, I mean, I that's my flash fiction kind of more pulp fiction character that I read about. But I think their system is a really great homage to the world. You were checking out some of their like book names, and
oh yeah,
like they're all themed in the same theme of all the books, like, you know, Conan the Adventurer, Conan the Warlord, so on and so forth.
The Barbarian, the Thief, the Wanderer. Yeah, I love that. And I gotta say, I've wanted to pick up the system for a while, and it's not super expensive, but I feel like if I don't do it soon, I'm going to miss out, because it's one that I've wanted. It's one I want to have it. I want to be able to play it. I want it to be able to reference it, which is why I'm slightly bummed out that it's kind of coming to an end, and with the uncertainty of kind of if somebody else is going to pick it up or where it's going to go, because I love Conan.
It's a really cool system. It's like a system that I feel like has a very low complexity character creation, right? Because it's random generated. It's fairly quick too. And then once you get into the game, there's, you know, like it just becomes, that's where you get the complexity, is the interaction in the game rules. And have you read much about the 2D20 system?
Not in its current iteration. I know some other games have used versions of the 2D20 system, but they seem...
The new Dune game?
Yep, I've read about that one, and I like it enough to want to pick it up. But again, that's Modiphius. So these 2D20 systems are pretty pretty well tied as one company right now.
Yeah, I don't think the 2D20 system has advanced enough that it's outclassed the older, like this Conan material that's a little bit older. Like, I feel like sometimes, like, just the way that we like to read or interact with rules changes. And I think they're still great.
Agreed.
I think it's a real fun narrative fantasy game. So I really dig it.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the material, and I think that there's enough material of Conan. Well, I guess that for our audience, I mean, most of them are going to understand that Conan was way more than just a barbarian. And when you look at a lot of his earlier days, he definitely was more like a rogue assassin thief. He wasn't just brute muscle and sword slay. That came later, especially after the Schwarzenegger films. So I'm sure most of our audience is familiar with that broader aspect.
Yeah, Conan's definitely a pulp character. He's one of those characters that has, at one point in time, every and any skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I think that leads into one of our previous episodes about how we all kind of love pulp characters, but to define that pulp aspect for our players and run those kind of games gets to be a little difficult. Would you say that Conan itself has actually nailed the ability to run that flavor, that style?
Well, yes and no. I think pulp translates really badly into actual D&D or RPGs, just because pulp is always centered around like one character in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. And just by it being a party game, you can't just have one person in the spotlight. So I don't think it captures that element, and I feel like if it captured that element, I mean, it wouldn't be it'd be a good solo game.
Sure.
I think capturing the aspects of like the kind of heroic nature and the abilities of Conan, I think it hits the nail on the head. It like it's a system called momentum, like where you can kind of cash successes and use them to not only like hit or succeed, but the way they're like the adventure settings are set is whenever you describe a room or an encounter or an area, there are always ways to spend advantage to interact with the world around you in ways that can be super helpful. And a lot of your talents and abilities like rely on building momentum and spending them to do heroic things. I think it feels like a Conan book.
Okay. So it does at least work in the at least getting the nail of the theme, the elements down, like you said. So
I love all the kind of setting stuff where they go over ruins and like if you're just trying to find like or write a good adventure about going to a hidden temple or like exploring kind of cult themes, the Conan the Barbarian or the Conan like supplementary stuff is great for that, especially with all their recommendations for like traps, and those interactions with the encounters can translate really easily to any other system if you're trying to hack it.
Nice. So knowing that it's kind of, I don't want to say on its way out, but knowing that support will be limited until it runs out, would you suggest try to pick this game up while it's easily available?
Oh, just talking about it, it actually kind of makes me want to start a game of Conan.
Yes.
I had forgotten that I had an entire humble bundle way back when of a bunch of their books, and so I now want to start a group.
Fair enough. They're a humble bundle. That's always going to be a tongue twister for me. Was it the PDFs or were you able to get a physical copy? I don't remember how that works.
It was all PDF. Their humble bundle usually is just digital only, but every once in a while there's a physical stuff. But for stuff like this, where I mean, I've had this bundle for whenever it came out. So like, and I've like, if it was just on my shelves, it would just occupy time, but or space,
both.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, dang. I had a code to get 30% off one of the books in print.
Nice. You think it expired?
It expired.
I bet you they'd still honor it. Like, yo, I got this coupon. I forgot to use it.
Yeah, they're probably already, I mean, if they're clearing out, they might already be offering it at sale. So,
right. Looking at the prices on some of them through Modiphius' website itself, it looks like they're roughly around $32 a piece, which truthfully is almost half the price of almost any tabletop RPG book brand new.
I lied. I do have one copy of one of their books out in my living room, and it's decent quality, especially for $30. It's worth it. So
I would say that I might pick up a few of them this week. I don't know, but as we're running close to time, you have any words of advice, things you want to add towards the end?
I'm using Veins of the Earth as a means of creating. It's basically an Underdark book, and it's got all these great options for how to generate and draw a cave system and map it out for easy use. And it's a great system. I like it.
Could you give us a link to that? Because working on something myself, I need a lot of caves, and I've been trying something. I'll fill you in a little bit on what I did after the show here. We'll see if it's podcast worthy, because I like to tell everybody what I can, how they can make their own stuff. Awesome. As for me, I guess like the typical fashion, reach out and find any information you can from any system you can and see if you can hack it into what you're doing. It's the best way to expand and kind of bend the player expectations. So other than that, guys, check us out at epictablegames.com, on Facebook at Epic Table Games, and maybe one day I'll get that blog post written.
Happy birthday.